Week 8. Okay, let's talk best win. I'm sure we could go Cleveland here, but I think Philly deserves some love because it feels like it's been a little while since we actually talked about them being a good football team. So they beat Cincinnati 37-17. Week 4, after they lost to the Bucs, they were 2-2. Felt like the head coach was out. People posting videos of Sirianni getting into it with fans. Now they're 5-2, playing the Browns and the Giants. Before Cincinnati certainly helps. But they were dominant in the second half yesterday, 27-7. They only had 3 first-half possessions because of a monster possession from Cincinnati. They scored on 6 straight possessions. Hurts has 9 total touchdowns in his last 3 weeks. Hasn't thrown a pick since week 3. Saquon's been great the last 2 weeks. It's the number 1 rushing offense in the NFL. Baltimore's number 1. Nobody's catching Baltimore. They're like 30 yards better at number 1 than even Philadelphia is. More under center from Hurts, something that they weren't having great success with earlier in the year, but it's something clearly they want to prioritize, even though they downplayed it. But it seems like it definitely showed up in the rushing attack yesterday. So 21 snaps from Hurts under center, which is high for him. And this defense that felt like they couldn't win a pass rush, but there was all this talent from the draft. Like, what is up with these guys? Can they get some takeaways? Well, they're getting the takeaways, and they're holding opponents to 5 yards per play, which is 6th best in the NFL. Denver's defense is number 1 in that category. And it would make sense when you watch Denver's defense because it's really good. They're 7th in scoring defense. So look, here's the point, is that things are coming together for the Eagles, for a team that when they were 2-2 with this roster, like, how are they drafting all of these dudes? How do they have these 2 guys on the outside? And they bring in Saquon. And it's supposedly one of the best offensive lines. They got rid of the coordinators. It's just all in Sirianni. And I just don't think when you have a talented roster, I don't know. I think the guys go out there between the lines and play football. And maybe the NFL and college are more dictated by who's in charge of the whole thing. But it just felt like the team was too good to be that disappointing, which is why we talked about how disappointing they were. But now they put together 3 really good weeks. Yes, lesser opponents previous to Cincinnati. I still think Cincinnati's a tough opponent. But this is a 5-2 football team that is back in the playoff picture. Baltimore could clearly be argued as the team. If you beat them, then that's the best win, because Baltimore is maybe on the short list with the Chiefs and the Lions as the 3 best teams in the NFL. I'm not sure if everyone would agree with me, but that's kind of the way I'm feeling about it right now. Lions dominant again. Chiefs we'll get to. Houston feels like they're overlooked a little bit. We'll get to them when we talk Colts. But if you're beating Cleveland, if you're Cleveland beating Baltimore, it's just that Philly's win feels like there's something building here and it's momentum, whereas Cleveland's win is like, hey, Cleveland had a fun Sunday afternoon after not having very many all season long. They scored 20 points as a team for the first time this season, and that's with Jameis Winston as a starter. Touchdown drives of 70, 72, and 69 yards from the Browns in the second half. Getting Teller back in the offensive line certainly helps. Chubb has been back, but it felt pretty one-dimensional from this Browns team yesterday. They're just going to drop back and chuck it. Jameis went, 27 of 41 for 334 yards. There's also that element of this Baltimore pass defense where statistically it tells you it's really disappointing. That I was arguing against what the stats said, because the resumes of opposing quarterbacks, what Baltimore had gone up against, are like, look at that group. Don't worry about that number. Don't let somebody on TV tell you that they're fatally flawed because of their pass defense. Well, this feels a little bit different. Now, to be fair, too, they were without corner Marlon Humphrey, who's been terrific. Also, Nate Wiggins was out in this one. But Cleveland moved the ball against them. So now I am perhaps more alarmed than I was about their pass defense than I was before, because I just thought, well, look at who they have played. I think at one point they'd played 4 of the top 5 guys at QBR in the NFL. Look, once Baltimore goes up 24-23 in this one, there were 2 dropbacks from Lamar where it was incomplete. And they're probably 2 of my favorite Lamar plays all season long. They just will be. The way he is able to, in the pocket, seem like it's over, and it's never over, and then just finds a way to sort of eject himself back like he's in a James Bond car. And he's just kind of magic. It's not even a hop. I guess it is. I mean, it has to be something that he's physically doing, but it'll just look like he is too inside the chaos to escape it. And then he just magically just pops directly backwards like 3 or 4 yards, gets out of the way of everything, and is able to make a throw. Although on these 2 that I'm talking about, him just getting away from everything, They were both incompletions, and I wrote them down just because I enjoyed them that much. Anyway, once Baltimore goes up 24-23, you're like, okay, this is a wrap. It's a fun little afternoon for Cleveland, but it's not going to matter. And then Cleveland has the football. And we'll share this with you because there's nothing to not share. I sent Big Cat a text because I know those guys love Jameis. And I was like, this interception from Jameis on this drive is going to be awful. And he threw it. He threw the interception. The problem is Kyle Hamilton dropped it. And very shortly after that, touchdown, game winner, Browns on the board. Kansas City is 7-0, and it doesn't feel like it. It's a bit like, I don't know if Indiana football is a fair comparison because Indiana football has not necessarily had the same level of success recently. Recent history is that they're not what the Chiefs are in the NFL, right? But maybe this analogy, boy, it sounds worse as I do it out loud, but stay with me here a little bit. The point is that Kansas City's 7-0, and maybe it's because we take them for granted, or maybe because you're watching them every single week and you're like, is this team actually this good? And they are with Mahomes because he just figures out the problems better than anyone playing that position. And he's certainly not having the best year of anyone playing that position. We've been over this. The offense is down, the defense is up, and there's just these games each week with Kansas City. You're like, this is a game again? They were up 17-13. Mahomes is throwing from his own end zone. The ball is tipped. 9th pick on the season for Mahomes, which leads the NFL. Both Baker and Jordan Love have 9 apiece. Love leaving the game yesterday. Alarming because he was hurt throughout so much of that game. So it wasn't really that final hit when he left the game. It just looked like he was struggling physically. And they're worried. And I'm alarmed as well as somebody who picked the Packers to come out of the NFC. So the Raiders have the football, the Kansas City 3-yard line. 4 plays later, a negative 5-yard drive. So you're like, all right, so they didn't pay for that interception from their own end zone with 3 yards to go. Raiders fumble. Kansas City had on one of the ensuing scoring drives, they had a completion where Mahomes threw it to the intended receiver. It went over his head, and the receiver behind him caught it. There's just all of these plays, it feels like more and more with Kansas City this season where you're like, that happened? I mean, if you hate them, you must absolutely hate watching them this year. Again, staying undefeated, yet doesn't feel dominant because of the standard that we have for their offense. Houston wins at home against the Colts. They're 6-2. And today they're the 2 seed in the AFC. And I never like throwing this out there because it gets thrown out too much because I'm not sure who's in track or who's in charge of keeping track of all this stuff. But it does feel like Houston's an afterthought, maybe because it's not surprising. But even with last year's spike, a rookie QB doing something that we're not used to seeing, and D'Amico Ryan's feeling like he's finding a way with a defense that isn't loaded with names. Although I do really like their linebackers. You get the point. Like last year, the story is this big surprise, and it's C.J. Stroud. And yet this year, C.J. is arguably better in more numbers. He's going to have more picks this season than he did last year. He stayed really clean with a 23-5 touchdown interception ratio. He's got 4 this year, so we'll pass that. Yards per attempt down a little bit. But when Nico's healthy, like clearly he's better this year than he was last year. So they're a 2 seed in the AFC, but I don't know what the right way to talk about them is. Meaning, like if they were bad last year, we'd be talking about them more because it was a surprise. And now that because it's not a surprise because they were good last year, but I don't know. They feel like a completely off the radar, really good football team. So this is another thing to throw in there too. It's not the schedule. Their strength of schedule is tied for the toughest strength of schedule with Baltimore of any of the 7 playoff projected teams today in the AFC. So it's not really one of those deals. You're like, they didn't really beat anybody. Although I think I've seen that argument made. All right. On the other side of this game is the Anthony Richardson experience. He's the worst starting quarterback of anyone who's actually a guy in the NFL. And it's bad. I mean, as bad as the numbers are, you have to kind of watch it for a couple hours to see. Like, you know when an NFL quarterback makes just an awful throw? And it just looks so weird because even the worst quarterbacks are usually pretty dialed into what you think they're supposed to be doing, even if it doesn't work out, or somebody just doesn't miss. Like when a real starter misses a receiver by 10 yards and the ball's hitting the dirt, you'll notice it because it reminds you of how infrequently it will actually happen in a game. With Richardson, it happens all game long. And he hits the huge bomb. just like he did in the beginning of the year. And people talk about his physical gifts, but those are cool videos. But the rest of it just isn't good. Now, if you want to tell me that somebody else is worse than him because of a spot starter, you want to tell me Rattler's worse, fine. You want to tell me Rattler's backup, Hayner's worse from Fresno, sure, you got me. But as far as dudes that were projected to be the guy and it is their job, I don't know how you can make an argument that anybody's worse than him. He was 2 for 15 in the first half yesterday. 23 seconds left, third down from his own end zone. He throws the ball out. We can bitch about play calling, but if you're an NFL quarterback, like you have to know risk reward in that spot where you're like, okay, well, this probably won't make a ton of sense if we don't make the play. Throws the pick, 7 yards later, one play. All of a sudden, Houston has a 17-10 lead at halftime for a game that was still 10-10. I mean, the Colts are 4-4, and that seems like a miracle. And so now you're left with this Richardson thing. I don't know how many people would disagree with me based on what they've seen this year because it's really bad. I mean, he has, I think at this point, I wrote it down, he has 55 completions. He has 41 carries. And there's just all of these little things. And I know he's getting crushed today because it looked like when he was tackled, his left leg, he got hurt and he asked out of the game. And you're like, oh, this guy, like he's hurt again. And then he just said, no, straight up, I was tired. Like that run took something out of me and I knew I wasn't going to have it on the next play. That's just not going to go over well when you're not playing well. I'm not going to beat up on him a ton for it because I think the other part of this is that 4-4, who are you? Well, sure, you'd be better with Joe Flacco, but better at what? Maybe sneaking into the playoffs to then do what? Likely get destroyed by a good team. So is it worth pulling the plug on Richardson as bad as he's been to do that, knowing that it would be better? And I know like week to week, we can go, hey, they have a better chance to win. That's you just got to go out there. You owe it to the rest of the guys. Yep. But you also owe it to yourself when you spent the number 4 overall pick 18 months ago on Richardson. You owe it to yourself to confirm that you were wrong about the pick. So I have no issue with them running him back out there if he's healthy. How about a tweet that was doing a lot? I saw one this weekend. It was my guy Greeny over at Get Up. Very disappointed with the Jets. Quote, in a season filled with embarrassing performances, that was the worst. The Jets lost to the Pats. In a history filled with horrible seasons, this may be the worst. The Jets of 2024 are one of the truly colossal failures in recent sports memory, and it only gets worse from here. They're not good. Not telling you that they're good. I guess I just didn't feel like I was a part of history yesterday. Grandkids pulling up by the fire. Double R. What was it like when the Jets lost to the Pats? Yeah, I don't know. People hate the Jets, though. Hate the Jets. And Greeny loves the Jets. So he's just very disappointed with all of that. All right. I have a final statement here. I told everybody I was a Bears fan this year because of my belief in Caleb Williams, a belief that I rarely have with first-round quarterbacks because I just, as we know, we've covered it. Like, I don't know, maybe. But I thought Caleb was one of the most dynamic players I'd seen in college football. Rocky start, even rockier in comparison to the guy that went behind him in Jaden Daniels, who's been one of the best quarterbacks in football this season. So this was a top 2 pick showdown that I was invested in emotionally. It's not like I didn't think Jaden was going to be good. It's just, and even with the rib injury, Jaden was better. But I would say after 7 games, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. So officially, I'm not a Bears fan. Caleb coming into this game was the only number 1 pick at quarterback to have a winning record through 6 games since 1970. So as bad as the first couple of weeks could be, things got a lot better for our guy. We know that. But he had 36 passing yards through 3 quarters. I'm not an excuse guy because I'm not a Bears fan anymore. So I'm not making excuses. But he was pressured on 52% of his dropbacks. O-line health was an issue in this one as well. But I found a positive for Caleb Williams in this game. Yeah, believe it or not, I did. He looked shot sitting on the bench as they were getting ready to end the first half. Like, just, this isn't fun. And that front from Washington, how about my guy Johnny Newton, Illinois? They're really good. I don't know if Washington's defense is really this good because prior, like some of the offensive numbers you could dig in all this stuff. But man, at least there's guys you can name all those years. Although Washington feels like their front 4 always has some names on it. But it looked so bad for Kib. You're like, how is he going to respond? Well, respond he did. He fought back. 3 drives, late, 2 touchdowns wrapped around a goal line fumble where they decided to hand it off to an O lineman. And then still took the lead after that. So Caleb, we all learned about resiliency from the number 1 pick. I think that's the positive. Then something else happened. Washington hit a Hail Mary with 2 seconds left from 52 yards out on a tip ball where the tipped ball was tipped by a player that had his back to the scramble because he was talking shit to the fans. I do think a technology suggestion for broadcast on Hail Marys, let's have a little picture-in-picture. Just stick it in the lower right, maybe lower left, actually, have it behind the quarterback dropping back so it doesn't interfere with the scanning of the football going into the end zone. But we can see the scrum live picture-in-picture while the quarterback is back there dancing the whole time. And we could see number 29 decide, I'm going to talk shit to the fans while the play is live behind me. So tip ball, touchdown, Hail Mary, and I'm out. I'm not even from there. So it was pretty easy to just stop being a Bears fan this weekend.